incoherent response, were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought?
We have lots of rational thoughts today, my friends. Yes, welcome to the Author Brand Show. This is your host, Doug Crow. If you like what you hear today, and you darn well better, click below, subscribe, check us out. We got a lot more shows. But of all the shows we've done, I got to tell you, it's very rare to get on somebody who is famous and also a friend, because I only have a couple friends who are, that cool. But this guy has won multiple Oscar nominations, over $1 billion worldwide revenues. He's a film producer, best-selling author, 30 years of experience as a business strategist, record label founder, literary manager, and entrepreneur. He's produced things like, films you've heard about, like Mothman Prophecies, Under Siege, and a little romantic comedy called Pretty Woman. And he's launched hugely successful careers for dozens of writers, filmmakers, in the highly competitive world of film and television. His book, Conquering Hollywood. You didn't think I'd have this up with you, right? The Screenwriter's Blueprint for Career Success. And he's got an 8-week masterclass and live coaching are just some of the ways he helps people learn to tell their stories and tell them more powerfully and rapidly transform their talents into a career, whether it's inside or outside Hollywood. And his quote, his moniker here is, what drives his endless optimism, creativity, and desire to help is an abiding curiosity about people and a deep love of our shared humanity. So welcome to the show, visionary and all-around cool cat, my friend Gary Goldstein. How you doing?
Doug, I'm wonderful. How could I not be wonderful after an introduction like that?
Hey, man, you wrote it. I mean, you're a writer. Of course, it's going to sound pretty good. It's okay.
The beautiful thing about being liberated and having zero memory is I don't remember what I've written, let alone what I've said.
It's so funny. I was looking at some old content I've written, haven't published. I'm like, that's a really good blog post. Like, oh, I wrote that. I forgot about that. I just got stores of stuff that I got to get out. But yes. So, Mr. Goldstein, wow, what a career. And I joked about the attorney thing, of course, because we love all of our attorney jokes. But you were not one of the, you weren't an ambulance chaser. You were a different kind of attorney. How would you tell me about your career when you started out as an attorney? We'll get to the movie stuff in a minute, but I want to know about the early Gary, the young Gary.
Yeah, well, the early Gary was well, gosh, it all started when I was a child. I was very shy. I went to UC Berkeley undergrad. The one thing I loved was music, and I thought I was going into the music business. I produced all the concerts for the Berkeley campus, but basically, here you are. It's a different era. We didn't know the word entrepreneur. Came out of college, had no idea. I was a lost soul. Didn't know what to do, and after several years of bumbling around, decided that I had this very romantic notion, and some of my heroes were the great criminal defense lawyers defending free speech and other things. And I went to law school to become a criminal defense lawyer. So I did. And I did that. Actually, I was rejected from law school. It's a great story how I got in. But I did that for several years and then realized it was just really not a good marriage of temperament to career. It was a very harsh world, and I wanted to flee.
Yeah, I don't see you as a criminal defense attorney,
Yeah.
saying, show me say hello to my little friend. I mean, you'd be defending the drug lords of LA. I mean, that's just weird.
Yeah, well, I ran away to the circus, I always, when I was really young, I fell into books and music, but first books. And that was it. That was my world. I was like the boy in the bubble. I loved storytelling. And I just didn't see myself as an adult making adult choices. I didn't know what to do. So anyway, I pursued the law, which actually is an amazing background. I'm grateful not to be an attorney, but I love the background. But I wanted to be in storytelling, and the film industry, telling big stories on the big screen just seemed like would be such a rich, interesting life. So I went to LA, and that's what got me down here.
All right. Well, obviously we have some, beloved films you've done, but maybe you want to talk about the early ones before that. I don't know if you do or not.
Yeah. Listen, when I got here, Doug, honestly,
Yeah.
I knew not a stitch about the business. I came here as naive as the day is long. And I didn't know anybody here. So I didn't know the business. I didn't know the city. And my first year in LA, actually, here's where my office was. My office was tennis courts and a swimming pool at an outdoor health club where it was always sunny because it's LA.
Yeah.
And I figured, who would be at this kind of a place in the middle of a work week? And I just assumed they'd all be freelance creatives, and I could network there and find mentors and friends and learn about the business. And that's exactly what happened. So I would just ask everybody I met, like, it's great to meet you. And what do you do? And they'd say, oh, I'm a writer, or I'm a whatever they were. And I would go, oh my God, would you be my 5-minute mentor? And I ended up making a couple of hundred friends over the course of a year. But long story short, I made a decision. I'm not really a good, I don't see myself in a corporate environment. I'm more of a solopreneur, an entrepreneurial kind of guy. And I thought I want to do my own thing. And I learned about management, which is different than agency, right? So being an attorney, I know how to represent people. And I thought, but I don't want to be an attorney, but I know how to represent people. Maybe I could represent young, up and coming, unknown, but talented writers and directors. And that was kind of that would be my way to earn a living, learn the business, and school myself. And so that's the choice that I made. I just, started up my own literary management company and signed a bunch of people as clients who pretty much had no resume. And I used, it took me a couple of 3 years of bruising my knee and tripping over myself to try and figure out how this business worked, and meet a lot of people and learn how to read scripts and how to, what did a writer's deal look like? How do I negotiate a writer's deal? All those things. There was a mountain that I had to climb to learn this stuff. But I was very motivated, and I had to do it partially just to survive, because I didn't really have much money in the way of savings. And if I didn't learn how to start having I earned based on commission. So if my clients weren't earning, I wasn't earning, and that would be very unhappy. So I was very motivated, and it took me a couple of 2.5, 3 years. And I finally built a business that actually turned out to be not only rewarding, but very well matched to me. I loved what I did. And I did that for the first, at least decade that I was in LA. That's how I got my start.
I love the story that you told me a few times on how these, networking is such a powerful thing, and people tend to overlook that in the social media marketing world. They're like, systems and funnels and all the jazz. But you and our good friend Kent are like the top networkers that you know everybody, or better way, everybody knows you. It's a key distinction there, right? It's like, wow, yeah. And I love the story of how some of these scripts came into your world. So you want to share how the Pretty Woman script came into your life?
Yeah, I mean, that was a fun one. I'm terrible with time, as you may well know, but it was somewhere in the 80s, like maybe 84 or around there. And Apple had come out with, those early computers that were like, they came in a box the size of a refrigerator, and you couldn't just plug them in because they didn't do anything. You had to have someone come program them, create what we now call software. And I knew a screenwriter who was writing scripts on one of these machines. And I said, who did that for you? And she referred me to this young, then 23-year-old Jonathan. His name was J.F. Lawton. And he worked in my office for 3 weeks, peppering me with questions, learning everything that I did, how I represented people, what kind of programs I would need to, advance my business, et cetera. Anyway, he spent three weeks, and he was kind of quiet, obviously brilliant. And sort of toward the end of the 3 weeks, he said something, and I said, wait a minute, are you, I know you install computer systems and you beta test software and you do all these things at the bleeding edge of certainly back then. But did you go to film school? Are you a writer? There's something he said that made me think he was a writer. And he confessed that he had dropped out of film school, that he was a writer, that he'd written 7 scripts that were sitting in a stack in his one-room studio apartment in Hollywood that no one had ever read. And I said, well, gosh, you're a really good guy. Why don't you let me read something that you've read? And if I like it, I'll help you get an agent. And long story short, I read one and I said, this is actually pretty good. Do you have anything else? He gave me another. I read the second one, same thing, a third one. And after 3 scripts, even though they were sort of quirky college-y scripts, I said, you're really talented. Let's forget the idea of an agent. I want to work with you. But I want to work with you. I have a condition. And the condition is I need a new, mature spec. I want you to write a script on spec. And I'd like it to be a romance. But I want it to be, like set it in a shoebox, set it in so we could make it for almost no money if we had to. And then if we get lucky and we do well and the script gets attention and we get bigger budget, yes, then we can, cast it up and have more production value. But anyway, that was sort of the deal. And he said, yes, absolutely. And he went away and he came back. It wasn't even 3 months later with a first draft of a script called 3000, which if you've seen the film Pretty Woman, the amount of money that Edward pays Vivian for her companionship for the week. And it was not a comedy. It was a tragedy in the sense that boy and girl don't end up together. He drops her off on the curb, money fluttering through the air as he drives off to fly back to New York. But that's how the script came into my hand, just because I had bought, and it sat in the corner of my office for several months, this computer, and the one person who could help me with that turns out to be this amazing writer. So you just never know where you're going to meet.
It's great. And then, so it wasn't a comedy, right? It was written, you said it was kind of dark. And then
yeah, people always, that's kind of urban legend, it was dark. Well, yeah, it was dark in the sense that he's an investment banker. She's a working girl. Mm-hmm. They do not end up boyfriend and girlfriend in love at the end. So, it was a more, dare I say, realistic picture, and not sort of the fairy tale.
Yeah.
But you know what, Doug? It's interesting. There was an article not long ago published, and they touched on something that I've always thought was true, and no one's ever actually written this, and it's fascinating because the original was an edgier, more realistic, if you want to call it dark, fine.
Yeah.
It was a tragedy, not a comedy.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a little bit there were edges to it. Okay. So in that process of transforming it into a comedy, when it was an independent film, it was always intended to be a little indie film. Mm-hmm. When I got it to Disney as a writing sample, never thinking that a picture about a working girl would fit with in the same sentence as Disney. And I told them, I sent it to them, I said, it's not for you. It's not even available. I've already optioned it. You can't have it, but the writing is so good, you're going to want to work with the writer. That's how that started.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But when we transformed it into a comedy because Disney wanted to pick it up and they wanted to lighten the tone. Yeah. We were such a small budgeted picture for a big studio at that time that we were kind of under the radar. Mm-hmm. But also we were in a rush to get into production for reasons that are boring, but we were. Yeah. And the thing that's interesting is that we were known as that little film in trouble because we started as a darker picture, a tragedy. Yeah. We were going to a comedy, and we were trying to rush through this to try and find the tone, the center of gravity creatively, as we're rushing into production. And we had as our director, Gary Marshall, who is just one of the most brilliant men who's ever walked the earth. Yep. Also, probably the nicest human being who's ever walked the earth. Wow. But he was also known as this was like the guy who invented modern comedy. Yeah. Between all of his TV series and all of his movies, he was just a genius. Mm-hmm. Effortless. So he had this sort of, almost like grass hanging out of his mouth manner. It's like, but he was always looking for that moment that would touch the human heart, and he knew how to do it. So part of his process was a lot of improv. So we would do it. We always did a take or two as scripted of every scene, But then it was like, okay, unfettered, take off the gloves, improv to your heart's content. Let's just see what happens. So we had this reputation of, so this journalist who wrote this article recently talked about the messy development, right? It was rapid, it was messy. He said, but what his thesis was, Pretty Woman is the best romantic comedy in the entire history of Disney. And it may be one of the best of all time. And the reason he felt is because it retained enough of that realism from the original script. It was anchored or grounded in some very human sense.
Yep.
It was recognizable.
Yep.
And yet we had the levity and the playfulness and the comedy, but it wasn't that over the top 100% fairy tale.
Right.
And somewhere in that midsection, in that messy midsection, our film touches a chord that may feel just a tad more, I don't want to say realistic, but it affects us in a slightly different way.
Yeah, when we can get things or ideas or concepts in our real world and then transpose them into something like meeting a billionaire, I think it makes us feel, that could have been me. That's it, right?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the fact that they, like her background keeps coming up, and they have friction around that, and there's all those elements in there. And yet she's the moral superior, and she heals him, and she has a best friend that she's trying to help, and she wants to go back to school and all. So there's all these sort of like little mini anchors in it. It's interesting.
Yeah. So a last piece on this, and we'll move on to some other things. But the you talked about the small film in trouble and casting it up and whatnot. Before Disney got interested, you said you optioned it somewhere else, and then was it just were there any stars at that point? Was it just going to be independently done, and then how did it go from where it was to getting stars in there?
What happened was, look, I was relatively unknown, and my writer client who wrote it was even less known. So I figured I had to make I had to find a way to create some buzz, some noise, grab some attention in the world. So I sent the script over to a woman that I'd befriended, Michelle Satter. She sat at the right hand of Robert Redford, helped him build everything that was the Sundance Institute first and later the Sundance Film Festival. Very brilliant woman, lovely woman. So I sent her the script and I said, Michelle, please read this. It's a new young writer. I think you're going to really admire the craft. She came back and she said, oh my God, this is absolutely a yes. They are renowned for Sundance. The Institute is renowned for all these very high level workshops and labs, and they've got dozens of them, from playwriting to writing to producing, you name it, and directing. And they invited us to be one of a limited number. I don't know the number, Doug. It was like 8 or 10 or maybe 12. I don't know, projects that get invited once a year to a production lab where you workshop it, where you have real A-level actors who get in front of the camera. You've got A-level people who are there just to support because they love the creative process for free. So I have Paul Hirsch, the editor of all the Star Wars, 50 films like Star Wars, award-winning, he's a god in the business. And this man, and I still have my training wheels on, and he's whispering creative notes in my ear, and I'm like, I think I've died and gone to heaven.
Wow.
So we spent 10 days up there or so at this production workshop. But the Hollywood trade papers all picked it up and they publish who and what. So suddenly the phone started to ring.
Yeah, right.
Long story short, I optioned it to a company called Vestron, which was one of the big, robust indies back in the 70s and 80s. And they brought us films like Dirty Dancing and, very, very good films. And but they couldn't quite get it cast or financed. During which time I was invited by some friends that produced an indie wonderful film that a lot of people will know called Mystic Pizza. And in that ensemble cast was this young gal. When the lights came up at the screening, I said, I have no criticism. Don't change a thing. The picture is great. But who's that girl? I need her.
That's right. Yeah.
she's a character in a film I'm developing. She's Vivian. And they said, okay.
Yeah.
And they kindly introduced me to Julia Roberts and her then rep, agent or manager, I forget. And she attached to it. Now, she was an unknown.
Yeah, right.
Because Mystic was the first film, and she later shot, but a film for which she got an Oscar nomination. It was called Steel Magnolias, but that hadn't yet been released by the time we were still casting and going into production on our film before that film came out. So America didn't know her, the Hollywood chieftains didn't know her, whatever.
Nice.
So she was attached for 3 years, during which time Vestron announced it was going into bankruptcy. So I got it in turnaround. I then re-optioned it to another indie called New Regency. Similar experience. We kind of got in the doldrums. They couldn't quite get it financed, couldn't quite get it cast. Richard Gere had turned it down at Vestron. I tried him again when it was at New Regency, and he said no again. Yeah. And but when we got to Disney, the magic happened, because up until then, let's face it, I didn't have a lot of clout. I didn't have a big studio. I didn't have a big checkbook, and I didn't have a major director like Gary Marshall. And we inherited him. That wasn't my brilliance. I was just like, oh my God. I knew who I wanted in front of the camera.
Right.
But when we got Gary Marshall, that was like God kissed me on the cheek. Yeah. And anyway, so by the time we got there, Richard still wasn't enthused, but there was one agent over there, Andrea Eastman at ICM, who he'd been with forever, and she banged her shoe on the table and said, "Richard, you just stop it. You got to say yes." So he did. Ultimately,
I love it, because
we now were a grown up at a studio, and he said yes. And once we had him, the studio Disney was still casting like a fiend. They had made multiple offers to actors, actresses. They were screen testing or auditioning everybody in the world: Michelle Pfeiffer, Molly Ringwald, Daryl Hannah, Diane Lane. I mean, anyone who was a name back then, was coming in. Many offers were made. Same with the guy. It was Al Pacino. It was oh God, I think it was Bruce. I mean, there were like a list of all the names, male and female. Some of them were made actual offers, and what can you say? Thank you, God. They actually declined the offer for a variety of different reasons, and so those roles remained uncast. When Richard came on, that was like a done deal. Okay, great. Now we got our anchor tenant, and that's when I advocated for Julia, not just to be met, but to do a screen test, because I knew if you got her on camera with Richard,
she's got it right.
And that's what happened. When Gary Marshall met her, he kind of, he saw it, right? And then when he says, Gary Marshall had a much bigger voice than I had at the time, of course. So when he says to the studio, I'm going to screen test these two, it gets done, and they burned up the film. It was so amazing.
Great.
And the rest is the rest.
Wow. What a fascinating story. In terms of people, in our industry, right? It's storytelling, right? I do books. And I think out of everybody I talk to hundreds of people a year, and half of them say, "Oh, my story should be a movie." I'm like, have you been to the movies lately? I mean, I just go, if it's not the Transformer script, it doesn't work. But you bring up Sundance, Netflix. It feels like there's a new era of places where you can actually tell good stories again.
You're spot on, Doug. I mean, it's there was a long valley. Because back then there were, when I started in the 80s, there were, I don't know, at least 24, maybe more, 30 independent companies that, so you could make it at the indie level, you could make it at the studio level. If you failed here, you could go there, or vice versa.
Right.
And there was a lot of diversity of story. It was all original stuff. We weren't in the business of having books and comic books and video games and sequels. And
Right.
it was original material, very diverse storytelling, and the budgets were this big compared to this big.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it got to the point where the opening weekend marketing budget was the size of my entire budget years ago. So but what happened was those indie companies all went away. They went away because the studios acquired them for their library value, or they went bankrupt or something. But then there was nothing. It was silent.
2 years. Yeah, it was horrible.
And then you had 6 studios basically making $100 million stars with a $20 million star on top of that, pre-marketed material, for lack of a better phrase. And it got lonely if you were a storyteller who didn't want to make Tron or whatever, what did you call it? The Transformers.
I'm trying to think of, because it's
or
no disrespect to people who created it, but it's not a storytelling. It's a business. It's just a machine to make money. Really, it's
Well, listen, and there are audiences for everything, thank God. But as a producer, as a storyteller, like and it's not that I'm a snob, it's just not my kind of story. So I don't really go, I as an audience, a consumer, I don't really go to see those films. And I certainly don't know how to or want to produce them. So for people, and there are a lot of people like me, we were sort of left with, gosh, is there even a seat at this table? Yeah. And now with the streamers,
I know
we've never seen the certainly not the quantity of product, both series and feature film, being funded and made. And when they started, it was mostly acquisitions. Now it's mostly originals.
Right.
So there's just an inordinate appetite for content of all stripes, even limited series and documentaries and formats that were previously unknown to us.
Right.
So that's really exciting. So in my view, streamers have are the modern day replacement for what was the independent film community back then.
Right, by a factor of 100 too. There's so many more venues and places to go. It's like, wow, you could actually make a movie now. But a few years ago, I'd say, don't bother. Just
I mean, you had to go to friends and family or credit cards or whatever. But now there's already 30 vibrant, vital streaming platforms. I mean, we all talk about Netflix and Apple and Amazon and Hulu, but there's 30 of them, and they all want different things, and they all have diverse. When you're facing not advertising dollars but subscriber fees,
big difference.
Now you've got a very, very globally diverse set of appetite to feed, and they got to make all kinds of content. Right. So it's a different deal, and I mean, I see the positive. I know there's some people who say, but it's also there's a downside to it, but I think I like you think it's a renaissance in terms of just the sheer volume of opportunity.
Yeah, I think so. And to that end, I want to talk about your business now, because you're no longer producing Hollywood blockbusters, I don't think, right?
We'll see, to be determined. But you know what? Let me put it this way. I would no longer have a business with a full staff devoted to larger budgeted studio fare. I don't think that's a good model right now. Yeah. So the slate that I am now and there was a period of years where I was on hiatus doing other stuff.
Right. Yeah, that's where I'm.
Now that the business has cycled back, I'm developing. I have like one TV series project, but mostly feature films. And of the feature films, there's only one that's like this epic, historic, big budget thing. And I am absolutely crazy about this story.
Good.
And it's all based on a true story. It's like you couldn't make this stuff up. It's so great. And I think there's a really deeply important set of themes to it, and I think a global audience for it. So we'll see. It's not easy today to get a big budgeted film made, but I'm going to do my damnedest. And beyond that, the films I would say are a little bit more, a little bit contained, either because they can shoot in a location where I can get subsidies and I can pare the budget down, or the budget itself is just a more contained film. I'm telling the kinds of stories that I want to tell, whether it's magical realism or just a performance-based drama, or sort of an epic thing that tugs at the sort of Braveheart, but not in the Middle Ages. You know, it's like it's a more modern story.
Sure.
So they're diverse and they're very different from one another, but most of them are not what I would call big budget films.
Okay. So if someone's watching this and they've got an important story to tell, maybe it's their story or something they've written, you know, can you sum up what they can do to further their, either not the career or their story onto the big screen or even a small screen for that matter?
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, if they've got a great story, I mean, I admire what you do. I think the business that you're in is really great because number one of the best stepping stones to whether it's film or TV and whether it's independent or studio, it doesn't matter, or streamer, is to, you know, if you can get a book written, that gives you some marketplace credibility and some industry credibility, right? Because we're all looking to have something that's affirmed, meaning it's published, and maybe even you've got a good audience or you've got traction at what we call a platform in publishing, which is, you know, you've got a built-in audience or a growing audience that will follow your work. Be that as it may, I think a book is always a good thing, but I think that what I would counsel people is, you know, if you really think you have a great story, number one, do something about it. Don't just say you've got a great story.
Yeah. Right.
So, you know, start writing it down, even if it's not in a manuscript, if it's not, just like get it down on paper so that you now are, you've got some heft there and you can actually share that and talk about it more because it makes you think it through, like what parts of the story are really important, what aren't.
Right. Yeah.
That's number one. Number two, look in the marketplace. Look at what has, not 20 years ago or 15 years ago or 10 years ago, but the last few years.
Yeah.
What kinds of stories that share some kind of kinship with yours? They're in the same genre, whatever that might be. What are this? And I don't care if it's small screen, big screen, TV, film, doesn't matter. What are the stories that have gotten out there that have been hopefully commercially and critically successful, but that have had some footprint in the marketplace that's respectable? And then I just research. I do this myself. If I have a project, I look, who are the people who made it? From the director to the producer, to the writer, to the cinematographer, to the casting director. I make a list of everybody because you don't need to start by saying, oh, I've got the best story in the world and an agent should represent me. A producer should spend the next several years of their life creating value and producing it for free for me. No, you know, like reach out, dare to be a human being, pick up the phone and call, you know, the writer or the casting and say, hey, I've got to, you know, would you be my 3-minute mentor? Or if you were me, what would you do? And share just enough about your humanity that it's not like assaulting them, saying, do me a favor, I'm a total stranger. Like, you know, pretend.
This is the most valuable advice that people just need to hear and repeat. And you should like write this stuff down, folks, because all the marketing and this barrier between people, whether it's a Zoom call or an email, like pick up the phone and talk to a human being. I love that.
Yeah.
So
there's nothing that shortens the distance more quickly and shaves years of frustration out of your life than daring to get out of your comfort zone and pick up the phone. And you know, they're not hard to find. I mean, between LinkedIn and Google and, you know, it's like, it's not a mystery. Right. So find these people and don't think that you need to knock on the door of Mr. Spielberg or Mr. James Cameron or Mr. whatever, Miss whatever. You don't need the top name on the door. That's the mistake, you know, like, oh, I'm so intimidated. No, you pick up the phone, you call the office. Who do you want to talk to? You want to talk to the person that answers the phone. I don't care who that is. You know, it's like the
dramatic pause here, folks.
This
is one thing I've learned from your book and your course. Who do you want to talk to? Repeat that after me. The person who picks up the phone. Because why, Gary?
Because they're your new best friend. Because A, they're available. B, it's their job. C, no one shows them any respect. They are treated rudely all day long because most people are trying to rush and brush past them to get to the boss. I built my entire career on the back of relationships and rapport that I developed with assistants, period, at full stop.
Yep.
I would call these people and say, hey, I don't know who you are. I don't even know your name, but holy crap, you probably beat out 50, 100 people to get that gig. To sit on the desk and be the assistant to so-and-so. I so admire the body of work. I'm calling, and by the way, here's who I am. Here's why I'm calling. I don't have any favors to ask of you. I do have a question. If you could be my 3-minute mentor, but I also want to know a little something about you because I'm amazed. Like, what's your trajectory? You're sitting on a producer's desk. Do you want to be a producer, an agent, a casting director? What do you want to be when you grow up in the business? But you must be awesome because I know how many people want to get in the door, and you got in, and you're learning the business from the inside out. So anyway, I'll stop boring you. But the thing is this: I don't want to talk to your boss. I want to be really clear. I want to talk to you because you have a unique perch, a unique perspective. You sit in the middle of all the information, all the calls, all the meetings, all the traffic in and out of that office, all the projects that are in development, all the things that are going into production. You're hearing all of it. You know what they're looking to develop and not looking to develop, and why. And I'm just a turnip that just fell off the truck. Yes, I've written several scripts. The one that I am most ebullient about is my most recent one that I've just finished it, but I'm not asking to send it to you. I'm not asking you to spend hours of your life reading my work because you don't know me. But I just wanted to say that to set the context. Like, this is why I'm calling you. I'm not just calling strangers. I'm calling people that I feel real kinship with. Like, I admire and aspire to walk where you've been as a company.
Yeah.
And then you are as integral to that company. I know. I mean, it's like you have access to everybody. So I want to see it through your eyes. And I have a couple of questions, and I don't want to take up much time. So would it be okay if I ask you a couple of questions? And they're going to say, yeah, because you've just given them a promotion. You've given them a raise, right? You've given them respect. And everybody says yes. And then it's easy street, because once you've done that once, and then, you know what I used to do? I'd literally, like,
3 minutes,
like, hey, I've used up 4 minutes. I promised 3. I lied to you in our first call. I am so sorry. I'm going to call you back a week from today. And if you're free, and if you have 5 minutes, 4 to 5 minutes, I'll expand the ask.
Yeah, right.
I would really appreciate that. But here's what you do. You're being respectful. You're making them laugh. You're being honest. And maybe your honesty is, hey, I am nervous as a cat on a hot tin roof. I'm stuttering because I'm not good. I'm an introvert. I'm not good at calling people. This is awkward as hell. Get it out.
Yeah.
Deal. Here's what most creatives don't know, writers. That they think they are subservient, that, there's a gorilla with great value and I'm just a little grain of sand with no meaning.
Yeah.
And you got it upside down. The upside down of it is, number one, their job is to know you. Their job is to, Hollywood lives on a steady diet of hope and expectation of discovering the next great story, the next great script, the next great artist. You are the product, not the script. The artist is value.
Good.
And you can't hide behind a script cover. And you can't hide behind an agent. Like, what's going to create huge, ongoing, enduring success are direct relationships where people know, like, and care about you and have a sense of your creative signature, your DNA. And they like you. And the only way they can like you is not because they know your agent. They can only like you if they like you. Right. So their job is to know people exactly like you. That's what we all want. We want to be the ones to discover that next exciting opportunity. And number two, look, they're all ambitious and they're young. You're talking to the person who answered the phone. They're not big. The bigger the success, the more generous and open and available they tend to be. But you start with the entry level person because their nature and their ambition, and they know that their biggest currency is to know other talent, to know writers, directors, producers, you name it. So they have a reason to want to know you every bit as much as you want to know them.
Wow. Networking advice, folks. It's from what I've learned from you and and other people, yeah, your net worth is your network. And you know, Gary, it's amazing what you've built from just caring about people, you know, and actually caring for, you know, people as a whole, not just because of who they are or what they've done, but because of their humanity, as you put it in your byline here.
Yeah. People are endlessly fascinating.
Yeah, aren't they? I love it. So tell us about your current project with the Creative Edge. How can people find out more about that? And what does it do?
Well, you know, I wrote that book that you talked about, Conquering Hollywood. It's available on Amazon. If you want to go deeper into networking, like how to do these things, that's in the book. So you can find that on Amazon. Easy enough. It's like $10 or some stupid 15. I don't know.
No, I paid $20 for my copy.
I asked him to increase the price for Doug Crow. So off the back of the book, I developed a masterclass because people will read the book and say, God, this is game changing, right?
Yeah.
But they also, their nose is up against the glass. It's very personal. It's hard to see, how do I apply all this for me? So I wrote a masterclass that really forces them. It's in a loving way. It's an exercise-driven set of 8 modules where by the end they've actually, because everyone's different, everyone's unique. No 2 creators are alike ever. And this gives you sort of your action set, your roadmap that you can say, oh, those are the people. That's why. This is the story. This is the conversation. This is, I mean, all the pieces now fall in place. So there's the masterclass, but I'm not really selling that. It's on the web. It's like, you know, you could find it. But here's the what I realized is I do these live group coaching sessions several times a month. People come into this live group. It's like dirt cheap. It's like $97 a month.
Oh yeah, it's way too cheap for for the value. I can tell you that. Yeah,
I know, but the idea is because I know from experience that a group learning environment, and it's not a huge group, but it's, you know, relatively modest size group learning environment is where you get the fastest, greatest traction. It's better than one-on-one because now we're all learning together from all sorts of questions and points of view that you hadn't even thought of. And so I do this. I get on Zoom just like this, and a couple of times a month at least. And people pay $97. They come. The calls are like, you know, I don't run out of gas. So they're always at least a couple hours, whatever. And it's amazing the success stories that come out of it, the collaborations that come out of it, which is really fascinating. People teaming up and doing great stuff. So that's the thing. Honestly, if you ask me, what do I really care about? It's the live coaching where I can actually see measurable progress, month to month, et cetera. So that, you know, there's that. I don't really have a link to offer, but.
Well, I can put it in the notes later if you want me to. It's up to you. You know, if you want to get more people on there or not.
I'll send you something. And you know, they can do that. That's probably the best. And or they can always DM me on social. I'm pretty much the same handle on every platform. Just at Gary W. Goldstein. Okay. I'll send you a link though, Doug. So that's the thing that I'm probably most keen on as a way of interacting with. You know, with helping people and interacting with creatives, because I you know, what I don't do, just to be completely transparent, you know, I get a ton of people writing me, or emailing or whatever on social, this, that, the other thing, and all they're saying is, hey, you don't know me. Here's a log line. Here's a description. Will you read my script and will you produce it, or will you represent me? And by the way, I don't represent anyone anymore. Right. But will you produce my thing? And it's like, no, I won't even read it. Most of the time. I'm just, you know, I can't do that because there's hundreds of people asking.
So many,
but I can coach those who are really committed and determined and want to turn a dream into something that's concrete and actionable. And
and by the way, I got two things to say in closing. Number one, I used one of your lines last week with a potential vendor who I was looking to, one of my clients he's got to deal with publishing like 60,000 copies of his book. Big order with an alliance partner.
That's huge.
And I'm looking for quotes, right, for getting all these things printed up. And I sent him a quote, some other quotes of people I was looking at, and he said, "Well, if you're looking at those people, then, you know, I'm gonna have to reject working with you." And so I used your line. I said, I respectfully reject your rejection. I was just looking around. I won't look at anybody else. I want to work with you. You're the broker. You're the person who's referral to me. It was a data point. I'm not shopping it out. I want to work with you. So he came back to me. Now, that line, I know where that line came from. And in the last few minutes, if you wouldn't mind sharing how you use that line, it's such a wonderful story. I'd love you to share that.
All right. Well, the short version is one day an attorney called me. He said, I have a client who wrote a script. Mm-hmm. It's an adaptation of a little book. It's based on true events, and it's called The Mothman Prophecies. And he said, so here's the catch. The catch is that his agent, he had an agent, the writer had an agent. The agent had shopped this script all over Hollywood, and everybody had passed on it, from little indie to major studio. And I said, well, that's a dubious honor that you want me to read the script that everybody in the world has passed on. But he had done this once before, this attorney, for a different client. And what happened in the previous instance was, I said, it's actually really good. And I know everybody passed on, but if he'll change the title and do one minor rewrite, if he likes my notes, for free. Yeah. And 90 days later, I sold it to Warner Brothers for $250,000, and then we got it produced. So the attorney looked at me and went, "You're the guy who takes the dead and brings
the original zombie right here."
I was like, "No, please don't tag me with that reputation." So I said, "Okay, send it." So he sends me the script. I read it, and it was like, "Damn, I have got to make this movie." This movie was very, it literally was like a smack in the face, because without going into detail, it brought me back to what my world was following the unexpected death of my dad, who was my best friend. And it was, anyway, so emotionally, this script was like, oh my God, this is the story of how I felt, and an homage to my dad. I got to get it made. Yeah. All right. So everybody's passed on it. Great. So same thing. I meet with the writer, good guy. And I literally found in the Hollywood Creative Directory, which is like, an inch and a half thick, a directory of production companies and studios. And I found one credible company that had not seen the project. And it was a good company. And why they hadn't seen it is like, I don't know, one agent was feuding with one of their execs and was going to punish them by not showing the script, whatever, some stupid thing. So I said, okay, I've got one buyer. That's good enough for me. So I send it to them, and you know how executives read it on the weekend. Yeah. You get the Monday morning call, and it's usually a pass, right? So Monday morning comes. I get a call, but it's not one executive. I sent it to one executive, a woman, and I'm now on the phone. I pick up the phone and I say, "Hey, Vic," and it's three people: Vic, her boss, and her boss's boss, who's the president of the company. Huh? And I'm like, "Oh, okay. What a surprise!" Okay, and I'm thinking to myself, "Well, this can't be bad news."
Yeah, the good news,
right? Unless they just, three of them are saying, "You're excommunicated. Don't ever send us another script." So anyway, we're on the call, and they go on and on. It's beautifully crafted. It's fascinating. I can't believe it's based on a true story. I'm totally intrigued, etc. And after all that ebullient, enthusiastic praise, the following line comes: "So thanks for sending it over. It's going to be a pass." And I knew this was last man standing. Yeah. There's a long pause. And I just utter what comes to mind, which is, "I really appreciate it, but I have to pass on your pass." And there was the gal that was on the phone. You sort of heard a little laughter in the background, like nervous laughter, right? Like, yeah. Can you do that? And I said, "No, of course I can't do that. You guys are, you do whatever you need to do. But here's what I would ask. We have a very respectful relationship. Mm-hmm. We've never made a film together, but we like each other. Okay. Do me the honor of giving me a face-to-face before you make that pass final. That's all I'm asking. Just give me my moment in court, not even a day." Yeah. And they said, okay. So I went over there on the Paramount lot. I took the writer, and I knew, the writer was young, and he was a little bit, let's just say he sat on the sofa and didn't say much. And I looked at these three, we had the chit chat, social chit chat. We sit down, calm
But
down.
you told me on the way there, you had no idea what you were going to be saying yet. It was
Well,
like,
I remember I was like at a stoplight, and suddenly it dawned on me,
okay.
what the hell have I just done?
What are you going to say?
Like I'm on my way to like my own execution.
Mm-hmm.
They've read the script, they passed on it. What am I going to tell them?
Yeah.
You can't tell them how you're going to improve the script because they don't really care.
Right.
So what have I done? Anyway, we get there and we sit down, and I look at these three people, and it comes clear, it's clear as the day what I got to do. So we settle down, and I decide I'm never going to mention the script. I'm never going to say the title of the project.
Yep.
I'm going to look them in the eye. I'm going to talk very quietly, and I'm going to tell them the truth. I'm going to tell them, when I read this was my experience. And I segued very quickly after a minute intro into telling them a short version, a 10, 12, whatever minute version of the story of my dad and our love and our friendship, and what happened when this man who'd never been sick a day in his life simply didn't wake up on his birthday, and the crack in the universe that was the experience of not just myself, but my mother, my brother, and like what were the next 18 to 24 months like, this intensity of the world literally inverting itself. And I was walking into worlds and having somewhat paranormal experiences like we experienced in the Mothman Prophecies. And I said, look, this took me to my knees. This script is very powerful. I can't imagine a director. I can't imagine a producer. I can't imagine an audience member or an actor who's not going to understand. Look, you don't have to have lost someone to understand the depths of pain and despair. It's like hardwired into the animal.
Yeah.
So this is a story that's going to move people globally. Let me please tell the story of my dad. And that's it, between those script covers. And they huddled, and they came back and they said, we're going to change our minds. We're going to say yes.
Wow.
And so the rest is the rest. We did a rewrite, of course, blah, blah, blah. But it really was a sort of a seminal moment, not obviously for that film, because I'm very, very it's like I'm so proud of that film and so glad it got made, and so appreciative that they let it be made. I think in this and every other lifetime, I'll always be glad that I got to do that as sort of connective tissue and closing the loop, so to speak. But the fact that, look, we are, and this is true of every goddamn human being on the planet, Doug, this, I know this, like, we are so much more powerful than we ever dare imagine.
Yep.
And if you the more you speak from that place, from your gut, not your head, not this thing, if you speak from the heart and the viscera and the gut, and you tell your truth, you become a leader, and you take people on a journey. So it's one thing to say, I've got the greatest story ever, that's nice. You're the artist. You go deep. You tell me why, how you're connected to it, why it's so powerful. Hear the truth. You tell people that, you're going to go places.
Wow. On that note, we got to close out this wonderful, wonderful chat, my friend. So many valuable lessons here, from networking and passion and purpose and living your truth. I love that, Gary. It's really good stuff. In the show notes, folks, if you want to get in touch with Gary and take your story and stuff to the creative edge, we'll put that in notes below, and we'll go from there.
Yeah.
But Gary, once again, thank you so much. I'd love to have you back on again. We got more to chat about. We can go off topic and talk about something even more interesting than stories, maybe. I don't know.
You got it. Anytime with you, Doug. I love our conversations. I adore you. I love what you're doing for these folks. And So
Well,
yeah,
I forgot to say thank you. I remember how I got started.
I remember the first time we ever met.
Yeah, well, excuse me, the author of your brand was your name. We actually did a book together first. Remember?
Oh my God, I forgot.
You forgot about that, my friend. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it was like, Doug, we can't scale this. Like, I don't know, I'm gonna do it anyway.
yeah. It shows what a good businessman I am.
Hey, no, you're right. I've been able to scale it to a decent level. I got like 7 employees and all that stuff, but it's not gonna go to thousands of books. And I decided I like it this way.
Well,
I like doing 20 to 50
I
stories
have
a year, you know?
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't want a mega empire. But the thing is, you also can't, I mean, you can measure revenue, you can measure number of employees, you can measure a lot of stuff. But what you can't measure is the impact of the work that you do in the world. Not just in terms of readership and
Yep.
results, but like how you alter the lives of the people who are becoming authors because of you.
Yeah. Yeah. Last story I should just share with you, but I talked to my business coach last year, and he's listening to some of my phone calls. He said, yeah, I'm with this one guy, you're very enthused and excited. You had a great conversation. The second one, you sound like you're a little bit bored. You weren't that interested. I said, yeah, the first guy had a really good idea that was gonna, change the world. The second guy was, he was on TV, he was just all about himself and his ego. I just didn't care. And he said, why'd you talk to the second guy then? I don't know. I needed the business. He goes, well, if you stop talking to people that aren't in alignment with your vision, you'll make more money. I'm like, I'm going to talk to like half as many people and double my business. He said, yes. He's my coach. I'm paying him money. I'm like, I'll do what you say. Business went up 300% that year. They told me that.
Yeah. Is his name Troy?
Pardon me?
Is his name Troy?
No. It's not
Okay.
Troy.
Anyway, I like your business coach. He's very wise because that's absolutely true. But we're all guilty of that when we're starting up a company. But
yeah,
there's a bigger game to be played. So good for you.
For sure. Yeah.
But I always enjoy our time together, Mr. Crow.
All right. We'll have you back on soon. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Gary Goldstein, famous, infamous producer and storyteller. Thank you so much for being on. We'll talk to you later.
Be well, my friend.
All right. You got it. And we're out. Thanks so much. Don't forget to click below, subscribe, get some